Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Inspired House Podcast. I am your host, Desmond Davis. And let me be the first one to tell you, welcome home. Look, I'm going to say that every single time, so you might as well just get used to that, right? It's the Inspired House. It would just be a crime against humanity if I don't start out the podcast with welcome home. So, for today's discussion, we don't have any guests. This is going to be just a conversation between me and you today, if that's cool. I was doing some reflecting, I was doing a little bit of reading. And in my discussions, whether I'm coaching my clients or just conversations with my friends, I've been discovering something I think is really interesting. There is this ongoing discussion about community. There's this ongoing discussion about networking, and I think both are very important. I think there's ongoing discussion as well about friendship, but specifically about networking and community. And so that's going to be what we talk about today, y'all. And I just wanted to give you some steps, some things that help you with knowing kind of the difference in how to establish those things, right? And I think before we can really establish a community, right, you need to make some friends, you know. Right? The Bible says, he who has many friends must first show himself to be friendly. And I think we have a hard time with that in our culture, especially in the United States. A lot of our friendships are shallow. A lot of our engagement and connection is shallow. I think we thrive with we we hate small talk, but we all small talk. So I think there's something that's there in terms of if we want to build community, we have to build some friendships. Okay. Now, hey family, it's Des. I had to pause the conversation for a second because I needed to ask you a quick question. How confident are you that you will eventually reach your goals? Now, don't lie to me. I'm asking on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being Desmond, I have a plan and strategy, and I'm constantly working towards that, so I know I'll hit it eventually. And 0 being Desmond, I don't even know where to begin. Matter of fact, let's take this a step further. If somebody was willing to invest $1 million into whatever your dream, whatever your goal is, but it was predicated on the fact that you had some type of plan, some type of vision, some type of strategy, would you get that money right now? Don't lie to me. You might be saying, Desmond, I know I wouldn't get that money because I don't even have a plan. I don't even know where to begin. And if that's you, I think I might have something special for you. I will be doing a free webinar. I'm going to teach people how they can create a brand, create vision and strategy for their life, for their profession, for the goals that they want to hit. And they're going to build it around their values. It's totally free. It'll be a great tool to help you propel into whatever you want to do next. And all you got to do is click the link that should be showing up somewhere on the screen. Or if you're listening via podcast, just click the link in the description. I'll see you there. Now, this is kind of two parts. So when I'm discussing community, I'm breaking this down into two parts. There's your friendship community, and then I think there's also your professional community or the community that's pushing you towards your professional goals. I think those things can mix, but I think oftentimes those are two separate things in some cases. So yeah. So that'll be what we are talking about today. Sounds good? Let's get into it. So I think when it comes to community, the pursuers of community, I think fall into certain categories. And right now I want to start with hustlers, grinders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, our 9 to 5ers who might have multiple jobs. You just hustling, you just getting it. You just trying to find that next opportunity so that you can take that next step. And I don't knock you, yo. Like if that's what you want to do and that's what's in your heart to go for, like, hey, go for it. But you do kind of fall into a category, right? When it comes to community, these folk tend to not necessarily have a community, especially if they're new, right? People who are seasoned, people who have been in business for a while, people who have been in the career place for a while. I think from what I've observed is I've seen there is a greater sense of community for them, but for the newer people, I think there's this mistake that we make where we drop our head down and we just go for it and we don't really look at making community. And our attempts at making community, honestly, is to really try to find that next step towards success, that next step on the ladder, that next opportunity. And really what you're doing is you're mistaking networking for community, right? So that's that one group. They grind, 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 and they don't really have a community. They think they're a part of a community. They think they're looking for a community, but their interests align more with opportunity and not connection, right? So one way to really, before we go into the next one, here's something I think is important. One way to really identify if you're searching for a community is to keep in mind your end goal. What is your end goal when you're looking at community? Are you looking for connection? Are you looking for belonging? Or are you looking for opportunity? If you're looking more for opportunity, you're not really looking for community. You're probably networking. You're looking the network masking around as a community, and there's a difference. All right, cool. So our second category for people who are looking for community, right? We talked about the entrepreneurs, the folk who are kind of just grinders and goers, right? I also want to talk about the person who just has a job. Let's just say you just have a regular job. You're doing your 9 to 5 thing. You don't have multiple jobs. You're just kind of doing one thing. And your goal isn't really that you're trying to climb the ladder. You don't have those type of ambitions. Your goal might be to just do what you got to do so your family's good and your family is your focus, or what you do outside of work is your focus. And so what we'll tend to find with those type of people is the community that they're looking for, they often don't find at work, right? And so maybe right now, oftentimes I think those people usually kind of get labeled as in the workspace antisocial. And reality is you ain't antisocial. You don't have a social problem at all in most cases, unless you are just antisocial, right? Let me not paint with a broad brush here, but a lot of times there are people who have community outside of their workspace, and so they don't need the work community as much as maybe the job would want, which is a really interesting thing. I think it was Simon Sinek who once said that back in the earlier days within like factories and jobs and stuff like that, even within society, he argues there is this premise of kind of everything sort of had its place, right? You might have found your sense of hope and meaning at your local church if you go to church. You find your sense of community and social activity maybe at your bowling league when you went to your bowling league. You found your sense of duty and work, right, and contribution. Well, duty and work at your job, right? You found your ability to contribute and give back by volunteering. And then you have your other categories for your other things, mental health, whatever. And so he argues that that was something that was structured back then, and now it's a little different, y'all. He argues, and I kind of agree, this idea that now a lot has changed in the fact that now we can sometimes expect all of those things to be in the job, right? We can sometimes expect our job to be everything, to sometimes be our social connection, to give us our sense of meaning by the work that we do, right? So now the work cannot be monotonous, mundane. I don't even know if that's the word, but it needs to be meaningful. There needs to be the sense of impact. I know as a millennial, that was something that if y'all hear any noise in the background, that's just my little baby girl. She hears daddy doing the podcast, and she just wants to let me know she's proud of me. Thank you, baby. But if you look now, even within our whole work situation, there's a lot of things that need to be in place. Right now we have things like chief people officers, which is amazing to see, but it kind of goes to this idea that because this is the norm and because we have these things in place, we can see folk who come to a job, see the employee resources, see the mental health counselor, see the work lunches and all these other things. And we could make the mistake that because they don't want to be involved in any of those things that they are antisocial. When the reality is they may not be antisocial. They might just have a community outside of work, right? And so that's another group. It's the person who works, but their community is not their work. Okay. So we went over two groups. The first one is the one who's just grinding, doesn't have a community and mistakes community for networking. The second one is the person whose community is outside of their job, right? And then the third one is the person whose community is their job. The people who they hang out with are the people who they go to work with. So after a shift, they might go to the bar, or they're going to each other's house for dinner, or they're going to their kids' birthday party if they have kids, or they go to the local show or whatever, right? They hang out. It's no longer a situation of, oh, because I work here and you work and you do your work, I do my work, and we call it a day. But it's like, oh no, like I have your phone number. You're my friend on social media, right? Now, again, it's not everybody. It might be that one friend that you have on social media, right? That one friend at your job, right? Because I don't think anybody has their entire job as friends on their social media. I know I don't, and I don't even post nothing crazy. I just don't need y'all in my business like that. Anyway, this person's interest is finding community in their job. They realize they spend most of their time at their job. This is probably the person who will stay after late, who will stay after work late hours and kick it and linger in their office and stuff. For a while when I was in certain jobs, that was kind of me. Being in higher education, right? Working in a college, there's this, especially as an entry level, you live where you work. You have an apartment that is on campus. And so there's no really going anywhere. If you want to go home, your home is on campus, right? And if you're in a whole different state like me, you definitely ain't going anywhere. So it gets real easy that the friends that you make are the friends who are also at your job. And so because of that, I definitely sometimes fell into this category. I was honestly a mix of 3 and 2, if I can be honest with you. And depending on how your communities work, those things can be blended. And so this third person, their focus is really on having that sense of community at their job. They pull that sense of me, and they also are probably usually the ones who pull that sense of meaning from work, right? When you ask them to tell, when you meet them at a party or a function or passing by or at a coffee shop, and you strike up a conversation, they're the type of ones that when you ask them, hey, so nice to meet you, I'm so and so, tell me about yourself, they're going to tell you their name and probably start with what they do, right? This is a key part of who they are. It's a key part of their identity. And I found that often what's a key part of our identity usually is the deciding factor behind how we do everything else, how we make community, how we make decisions, how we spend the rest of our time. And so if your job is the one kind of leading that ship, then your community probably will be your job, right? And that's the third person. And let me say, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with these three. Um, Honestly, I'm kind of not a big fan of the first one, and I'll tell you why. For me, I have had seasons in this year for me starting and launching the business and taking kind of my expertise in coaching and mentoring and building people up and making this into a business. There have been seasons where I have been that first community person where I'm thinking I'm pursuing community, but really I was pursuing opportunities. And oftentimes that was at the expense of actual community. That was at the expense of spending time with my family. That was at the expense of spending time with my friends. And so I feel very particular about the first one. The 2 and the 3, I don't think there's anything wrong with. I think again, as a reminder, for the second one, if you're not careful, you could, if you're not the number 2 and you're near a number 2, you could make the mistake of thinking they're antisocial. And I've seen those type of things actually affect people's performance reviews or performance evals, which I think are kind of gross, to be honest with you. But yeah, that they were like not very social, not a good culture person, and I think all that's subjective in the first place. And so yeah, so that's number 2 is cool. Number 3 I think is also cool. I think again, building community where you work, I think it's right, it's very convenient because you're always going to be at work, right? The world has to be falling apart for you not to be at work. And if the world's falling apart, they might expect you to be at work just virtually. So, right, we're always going to be at work. And so I think it's convenient to build community where you work. I think the pitfalls of that is you can start blurring lines and fall into some I don't want to say inappropriate, but let's say like unprofessional behavior where there can be a little too familiarity in those spaces, right? And that's when you're not as productive. That's when you might spend more time kind of joking around and not getting stuff done. I think it's important to establish this, right? When we talk about being productive, let me first give you my definition of productivity. My definition of productivity is to get the things done that you can get done in the allotted amount of time that you can to the best of your ability. Right? Just off the top of my head, that's productivity. Right? I don't believe in this idea that when we're at work, we need to be at 100% all the time. I don't think that's accurate, and I don't think it's actually a reasonable expectation to have on people. Right? There's with my team and the folk who help me do my videos and editing and stuff, I don't expect them. This is for you, Jean Paul. I don't expect them to be at 100% all the time. That's just an unreasonable request because nothing really in this life works at 100% all the time. I mean, besides God, right? And if you don't believe in God, then I don't know what to tell you. Then you might have to figure out something else that works at 100%. But in my experience, very, very few things will stay and work and stay at 100%. Unless it's plugged into a source. Unless it's plugged into a source, right? That's So y'all, I am very much churchy. I'm a preacher's kid, been saved all my life, and so y'all got to forgive me. I'll hear certain things, and I'm like, I can preach on that, but if it's not, we're not plugged, we're not machines. We're humans. We get tired. We lose focus. Now, is there opportunity to be more productive? Yeah, of course, right? Of course, there's opportunity to be more productive, but that doesn't mean that we're going to be at 100 all the time. And to circle back to the main point, for our third person, when they look at community, if they're getting community from their work, there's this risk that they could be less productive. But when we say less productive, we're not saying that they're functioning at 100% all the time. I think it's also worth mentioning, though, that just because someone has community at work doesn't always necessarily mean they're going to be less productive, right? Because I know sometimes when I'm at my best, I remember the days when I was working at my college, and because I was friends with the people that I was working with, and again, I think it's predicated on you having good relationship and also being in relationship with people who have clear goals and expectations for themselves, right? Some of my best work would be when I'm in community with my folks. We're brainstorming, we're working on projects, we're putting together programs, we're putting together reports, just vibing out, right? And those are really fond memories for me. I remember those times like it was yesterday. Now, you don't get that um if you're number two, right? You don't get that if you're the community number two person. You don't get that if you're the community number one person. But you definitely get that if you're the community number three person. And so those are the three types of communities that stick out to me that I think are really important for this conversation. So now that we know what we have with community, I think we then kind of pivot to understanding, well, if we know what community is and we know that this is about building bonds and connections, then what is networking, right? Networks are open chains of connections. They are characterized by the fact that when networks intersect, they become one large network. They are expansive and open without a concept of belongingness or close bonds. Cool. All right. So we kind of have our working definition of network, y'all. So if our network is this ever expanding thing, if it's these chains, right, these connections that we're using to kind of expand our reach, right? Because again, the connection, the characterizing, the building and the expanding is almost like building a net. It's almost like trying to get more reach so that you can capture whatever it is you're trying to capture. But networks don't necessarily have expansive and open. Wait, let me try that again. But networks don't really have expansive or open concepts of belongingness or close bonds. So if there's no belongingness there, if there's no close bonds that's there, then it's very transactional, right? Can be this form of just those pieces to help extend your ladder, right? Now, if you're one who networks with good intentions, I think you can begin to build community from your network if you're intentional, but oftentimes we don't do that. So, I want to pause real quick on this idea of our networks and kind of just touch on. So I think when we're looking at networks, it's really important to keep in mind our purpose behind networks and why we're pursuing networks. We usually have a goal in mind with a network. The goal is, again, it's like almost, it can be almost like going to a fast food restaurant. We're going, we pull up to the drive through, we give our order, we give some type of monetary something in exchange for something. And that something is connections. That something is uh, maybe a recommendation for a job, or it could be if a new job is opening up, they can let you know, or give a good word, or join and help you on a project, right? So the networks, they have a transactional goal in mind, right? Now there's nothing wrong with that. We need those type of things. I think it's just important that we keep in mind the difference. So when we're looking at networks, I mean, there's so many platforms. I think the most prominent platform obviously is LinkedIn, right? Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the king when it comes to um, networking, right? We call that the professional Facebook. I think we're always going to call it the professional Facebook. I don't know when we're not going to call it the professional Facebook, honestly. But right, but there are steps and there is work that's kind of actively being done to target and to address the fact that networking can often be transactional, right? So we have things like Meetup, right? I think that's a platform that tries to get folk together, right? But they ain't sponsoring it, so I ain't gonna go into any more detail. But things like that are really powerful because it helps us be a little bit more connection minded with our networking. And so I think that's really dope. But when we're looking at building networks, I think it's really important that we establish exactly what are we trying to get out, right? What is the end goal in mind? If you go into networking and you start your career, which you probably should be starting in high school or college, to be honest with you, but it's never too late. When you start networking and building your network, I think it's really important that you have the end goal sort of in mind. What are you trying to achieve? What avenues and areas are you trying to be in? What are your dream aspirations, right? Because it'll help you be more intentional about the networking that you do, the people who you connect with, the people who you don't connect with, right? It's not out of the question that there are just some folk you just don't connect with. I wouldn't recommend just not just I would recommend disconnecting with the majority of people around you, right? Especially professionally. But there are some folk who you're just not going to connect with, and yo, that's cool. That's fine. So yeah, so examples I think of community that come to mind are, let's say you're a part of like sports league, maybe you do flag football, maybe you're a part of a church, maybe you're part of a book club. You're a part of something, something that the focus is to connect, the focus is to be a part, right? And it's the beauty of it, right? Communities aren't goalless, okay? You can be a part of a community that has a goal, right? But in most cases, the goal that's in place is really just used to bring people together, right? And I think that's what's really powerful about communities is that it helps us come together and build that sense of belonging. While networks are used to help us kind of get to the next steps and goals in our life, but I think they need to come hand in hand. But just to keep that in mind, that when we're community focused, we get that better sense of belonging and connection. Now, I think what's really interesting is there was a study that was done that said on average, I think on average for Facebook users, right? So if you're not a Facebook user, I mean, hey, that's cool. But on average, Facebook users have like 337 friends on their Facebook. Meanwhile, they have 1,000 plus connections on, let's say, LinkedIn. And so in this society that we're in that's very business focused, right? We're a capitalistic society. And so that is a thing that's just the reality of where we're at. I think it's interesting that in most of these cases, a lot of the people in this study, they had well over 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, showing then that there is this pursuit of being transactional for the sake of a goal compared to building connections and having community. right? And if they do have community, it probably was a community within themselves, and they don't necessarily, and their community didn't necessarily mix and mingle with other communities, right? And that's why you see that low friend count. And so it's ingrained in who we are. I know it's been a struggle for me when I was so focused again on just trying to work and grind and work and grind, and I wasn't hanging out with people, wasn't spending time with my family. I was just trying to just go, 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 go. And I think if we're not careful, we'll fall victim to the grind, and we'll fall victim to networking, and we'll reach our goals, and we will find all of the success that we want, but we'll have nobody, no one, no community to share it with. So yeah, y'all, as we gear up for a new year, I know that's like a no, I guess, in like recording and content creation is you never really share the date, but like it's about to be the new year, yo. Like I don't know what to tell you. But as we get ready to start this new year, I think let us, as we're trying to hit our goals, as we're trying to be successful, as we're trying to, I don't know, maybe change and turn our lives around, whatever. Let's make sure that we're being just as determined and just as intentional with building community, because I think community is great. And if we have good community, we can then, I think, be more successful in our networking, and it be more honest and more integral. And so, y'all, let's build some community this upcoming new year. And if you want to learn how to build community, I always recommend please go to the Inspired House YouTube page, where we go through all types of information that helps you in your day to day life, your professional career, your connections and relationships, and your mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well being. So, y'all, thank y'all for hanging out with me with this discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, or if there's any question thingy down below if you're listening to the podcast. Drop your thoughts and let me know what you think. Are you more of a community person, or are you more of a network person? Have you figured out how to master both? And if you have, drop it below, because that's something I can still learn and still could use help with. But in the meantime, I've been Desmond. I'll see you next time. Peace.